welcome to episode 4 of Autism Journeys. Tonight we're delighted to have Micheál O Mathuna from the Autism Conference Cork on. We also have the lovely Aileen Foye, Assistant Dog Instructor from the Irish Guide Dogs Association. First though, we're going to revisit the Autism Bill. I was lucky enough to meet the wonderful Adam Harris from the charity As I Am at the Temple Grandin talk in CIT last week and ask his opinion on the bill. It was an absolutely fantastic event and Temple Grandin had so much to say. I think my favourite point though was that when she spoke about exposing a child to as many things as possible to help them identify their niches and their talents. I suppose such practical advice to allow the child to realise their potential. We were absolutely blown away too by the generosity from the lovely Noreen O'Mahony from the Munster SNA branch of Impact Trade Union on giving us 3 signed copies of Temple Grandin's books to give away. So I suppose first here's the recording. Adam, can I ask you what your understanding of the Autism Bill is? Do you believe that it's positive, or do you believe that it's negative? Do you believe that there should be some changes made before this becomes national policy and strategy, or do you think it's okay as it is?
Yeah, I think what the Autism Bill is it's an important step, but what I think people need to realise is that the Autism Bill isn't going to be the solution to everything. So I think the title of the bill is actually a little bit misleading, because when people read it, they think this is going to be a piece of legislation that's going to deal with absolutely everything to do with autism in Ireland, and that isn't the purpose of it. I think one of the things that's very important is, for too long in Ireland, we haven't accepted that people with autism are a distinct community with distinct needs that are very different. So the moment you go to the Disability Act, you open the front page, go through the list of disabilities mentioned, autism isn't one of them. As a result, so many of our services are services designed for people with intellectual disabilities that are totally inappropriate. Opened the last time we did the census, no autism, so we've no statistic on how many people have autism. So what has happened as a result is the services that have been put in place, and often a lot of money has been spent on, are completely inappropriate for a lot of our needs, particularly, I think, as we get older as well, and we're planning that next stage of our life. I see so many young people with autism being assigned to services that aren't designed for people with autism, where the staff are not trained to support people with autism, and where the environment would actually be extremely uncomfortable for someone with the condition. Across Europe, there's slowly been a recognition of this reality. So every nation within the UK has an autism bill. Most states in the United States, Canada. I was actually involved in going over during the Maltese legislation going through and spoke at the launch of that piece of legislation in 2016. So there is a pattern of autism bills. There is still huge opposition in this country to recognition of autism, and some of that opposition comes from other disability groups. There's a fear of autism and a stigma that I don't like. I think that there's an important opportunity to put on the statute book a recognition of the needs of people with autism, and an obligation to have a national autism strategy. The issue with autism, as you know, is we're quite a divided community, and we don't agree on everything. We don't agree on what sort of therapy should work. We don't agree, is it a positive thing or is it a negative thing? We don't always agree. And part of that, of course, is it's so individual and it's so specific to every single person. The problem is, as a result, when we write a bill like this, what's always traditionally happened when we've looked at autism as a policy issue in Ireland is the community's ended up rowing with itself. What needs to happen is that there's recognition of autism on the statute book, and then we work together to try and get a strategy that will suit as many people as possible. We have a history in Ireland of making legislation around disability and not fully commencing it. So, for example, to my knowledge, no piece of disabilities legislation has been fully commenced. So, for example, the Epson Act, for example, the Disability Act, the Citizens Information Act, none of those have the provisions, for example, around advocates fully commenced, and that's disastrous.
I suppose, though, with the Disability Act, for instance, you are looking at the assessment to need, and like that is an individual's right. It is like they are legally entitled, that's and correct. Therefore a parent has the right to go and insist upon this being thing. And I suppose one of my things around the Autism Bill is that a national strategy sounds absolutely fabulous, but it needs to state that the person with autism has specific rights, that they do have rights. It's great to talk about services and supports and stuff, but it is about having specific rights seen, acknowledged and put into legislation so that
I mean, you're never going to find me being anything but supportive of that.
Yeah.
I think, again, the important thing to realise is that the rights piece is still going to be largely dealt with in the Disabilities Act, because they're not going to start treating one disability different to another one.
Yeah.
The reality is, how do we approach the specific challenges faced by this community?
Yeah.
Where I'm completely in agreement that the bill needs to be improved. So, for example, I think having the word disorders in an autism bill is very disempowering. I think it's very concerning still that the bill uses very medical language, and I don't think it speaks enough about people with autism themselves having a degree of control over what direction this strategy takes. So I'd like to see the bill amended. I'm completely in favour of seeing the bill strengthened, but the point that I think is so important to recognise is that we need to get this bill over the line, because unless we have a national autism strategy, we're never going to have proper recognition of what the needs of people with autism are. And there's the argument that's been made by lots of people, well, can we not have a strategy without having a law? The reality is we have strategies like the National Disability Strategy that are based in law, that were still published 2 years late. So there's a reality that if the state is that lazy and that poor around developing strategies that are required in law, what chance does a strategy have that isn't based in the statute book? So do I think services and early intervention needs to be improved for people with autism? 110%.
Absolutely, yeah.
Would I support any legislative initiative to do that? 110%. But what I think is that this specific piece around having a lifelong strategy around people with autism, we need to make sure that doesn't get lost in the context of other debates, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
And now we're delighted to invite to welcome our next guest, Micheál O Mathuna, the organiser for the Cork Autism Conference 2017. Good evening, Micheál.
Good evening, Sharon. How are things?
Great, Micheál. Thanks a million for agreeing to come on air with us this evening.
You're welcome.
I suppose I have a couple of questions for you, Micheál. The first being, what experience do you have yourself with autism? Do you have any personal experience, or do you work in the field?
Yeah, well, my own experience, Sharon, with autism is I actually have a brother with autism who's actually in his late 30s now, and he's non-verbal, and I suppose I'm come from a place of actually growing up with autism all my life, and especially with my mother as well. Like, she's been studying and finding out loads about autism for the last 30 odd years. So I suppose with that, like going back 35 years ago when my brother was first diagnosed, like, people being diagnosed with autism was about 1 in 10,000. Now it is about 1 in 60, you know?
Yeah. No. That makes perfect sense. I suppose motivation as a family member is often the space that a lot of people come from.
Well, that's exactly it. And I suppose what kind of inspired me to set up the Autism Conference, I could see there was a crying out need for education and in empowerment, as well as a forum and a platform to bring people together to better understand and find out about autism as well, Sharon.
Yeah, I suppose to create that awareness. Micheál, tell me a little bit about your speakers. What kind of qualifications do they have, or credentials would they have, and would they be very experienced specifically in the area of autism?
Yeah, well, we have a number of different speakers at the conference this year, Sharon. We've one gentleman, his name is Michael Barton. He actually has autism himself, and he's written a number of books on it. He's coming over from London, so he'll be speaking about his own journey with autism, as well as he's actually working in employment now. He's in his mid-20s, so that'll be quite inspiring. There's a lady, she's a senior educational psychologist and a best-selling author by the name of Davida Hartman, and she'll be looking at understanding and supporting anxiety in people with autism as well. And we have Dr. Emma Ring. She's from Mary I, and she's in the Department of Early Childhood Studies there in Mary I, and she'll be looking at the languages of autism, which will be quite interesting as well.
Okay.
And there's another lady by the name of Mary Mullally. She's been working in the area of autism for the best part of 20 odd years, but she'll be looking at the sensory, motor and relationship perspectives of both children and adults with autism.
Okay.
And finally, we have a parent with autism, or not with autism, but with a daughter with autism, Mary Dollard, and also a lady with autism by the name of Deirdre Lynch. She's up there from Dublin, who will be sharing her own personal journey with autism as well. So we've got a great, I suppose, selection and different perspectives both the parental, the
personal, yeah,
as well as the person with autism as well, you know.
Yeah, no. That sounds like quite a good setup. I know Micheál Barton. I'd be a big fan of his book. It's Raining Cats and Dogs. I think that's
right.
Yeah, I think that he seems to be a very powerful writer, and he seems to know his stuff, I suppose, because of his personal journey. Can I ask you, Micheál, with regards to all the speakers that you have, like the one that jumps out here at me personally is the Davida Hartman, the woman that's talking about and anxiety and understanding and supporting somebody with anxiety. Will people be able to? Will it be an open forum? Will people be able to ask questions and to discuss?
They will. Each speaker will give a formal presentation, which will range from like say 20-25 minutes to some talks that are going on for maybe about 50 odd minutes. So it depends on the speaker and the content they have on the day. So initially, everyone will present. So it'll be a morning schedule, and then there will be like a space in the schedule then for about half an hour where there'll be question and answer discussion with the speakers. So that will happen in the morning as well as in the afternoon, and there will be time during the day, like during the lunchtime, the tea breaks as well, to have a chat with each of the individual speakers as well.
Good, because I suppose a lot of people with autism and family members of people with autism are so focused on their own individual journey that oftentimes they're looking for information or some practical strategies beneficial to them particularly, do you know?
That's it, and I think that's one of the things I like to stress there, Sharon, is like you know, with this conference, and I've stressed this with all the speakers who will be attending, to really offer practical tools, resources and strategies to best support and empower people with autism, you know, because really on the day-to-day level, it really counts when you're with someone with autism, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I think theory is all great in theory, but it's the practical strategies, the stuff that you can use on the ground that actually makes the difference to a person living with autism.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you know? Micheál, can I ask you, where can people purchase tickets and how do they access more information about this event?
There's two ways, Sharon. One way is you can go online and go on this website called www.bookwin.com/Autism Cork. That's www.bookwin.com/Autism Cork. And the second way as well is they can book over the phone as well if they're not able to use the internet. And there's a phone number there as well as 089 239 8900. That's 089 239 8900.
Okay, no, Micheál, that sounds good. I know I've actually gone and purchased a ticket myself. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to see what your speakers and what the day brings, we'd say. Micheál, one other thing, I know that you very, very kindly offered 2 tickets up for grabs for 2 lucky winners to attend the conference on the day. Am I correct?
That's correct, Sharon. Yeah, they'll be offered to your members or anyone who'll be your listeners there. I think you're going to do something on Facebook for them there, you know, so it will be up to yourself there, Sharon, to go to the lucky winner and just let me know.
Yeah, no, absolutely perfect. I think what we're going to do is we're going to ask people, I'll pop a post up after the show, and we might ask people to like, share and comment on the post on Autism Journeys Radio Show 104 FM Facebook page, I suppose, and maybe perhaps to tag somebody that you know would love those as well, do you know? Micheál, the other thing I will ask is that I know you've also kindly offered a 20% discount on these tickets until Friday midnight, yeah?
That's exactly it, Sharon. Yeah, we're just offering a special discount there to anyone of your listeners there who've been listening in, and that will be valid until midnight Friday night. And all they need to do to qualify for the 20% discount is use the code CRY20, and that's capital CRY and then 2020.
So CRY20 is the discount code that anybody that wants to purchase until midnight on Friday can do so.
Perfect, sure.
Micheál, thank you so much for coming on the air, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person on September 17th.
Great, Sharon.
Thanks a million. Take care, Micheál.
Cheers, Sharon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Now, we've had lots of questions in this week from different parents asking different questions about school and strategies and all that. One of the questions is, my child is newly diagnosed with autism and he's going into first class. He finds school very, very difficult. So I really would appreciate some help figuring out what will work and what will help him with anxiety, with his anxiety and the behaviour happening because of it. Now, I suppose to answer that question, before a child even starts school, it's important to establish a morning routine. This can help set him or her up for the day, I suppose. Visual schedules that list in order what has to be done are a great way to start. You can either use words or picture schedules with tasks that need to be completed. This helps to take the anxiety out of the first part of the day goes for the person with autism. I suppose it's important to note the level of literacy that the child has and to take note of whether or not a visual schedule with pictures or a word would suit the child better. Another strategy that lessens pressure felt in the morning by children is to lay out clothes in sequence with the first item that the child is going to put on top and the last one on the bottom. I suppose an example would be underwear on the top of the pile while the school jumper is at the very end. When things are organised in that way, it takes possible mistakes out of the equation as well. Now, you can initially do that with some help, either the night before or as the individual gets his clothes ready for the day ahead. But it is a skill that, if it's practiced routinely, it is a skill that can be easily acquired. Another tip that we would use in our home is to utilise the opportunity to prepare school bags and our lunch boxes the night before. That way your child has more time in the morning to focus on other things. I suppose look at sensory inputs too. The morning that can be used in the morning before school. If the child is a sensory seeker, for instance, including a minute on the trampoline or using an electric toothbrush as part of his getting ready for school routine might actually help set him up for the beginning of the day. If he avoids sensory input, items like ear defenders may help him to stay calm and focused while he's completing the tasks that he needs to get done to start his day. And now I suppose it's important again to note that all parents know how their children work, and that it's very important to maybe have a trial run on a morning that there isn't school, just to help it figure out what suits the child best and to make things easier. Another strategy that many people in the autism community use is a passport for the child with all of his information on it. For example, what he likes, what he doesn't like, his favourite subjects, his topic of interest, what his triggers are, which sensory strategies he prefers, what helps to keep him calm when he's feeling overwhelmed. What you do then with the passport is you actually pass it to the class teacher, and the class teacher can disseminate the information to SNAs or anybody else that would be in touch with your child during the day. I suppose that helps to, if there is any issues moving forward in school, it helps everybody to understand that there is a reason for behaviours should any challenging behaviour arise. I suppose to go back to visual strategies, schedules are vital. It's really important to have a schedule available to a child in school. I suppose to lay out the day where possible completely clearly. For example, you might have maths first, then PE. You either write these words or you can use a symbol or a piece of imagery to symbolise those things, maybe a plus and minus signs for maths, or a football, for instance, for physical activity. You should complete the schedule using that kind of a layout. Now, the schedule can also be written, as I said, but one thing that is important to note is that if a child is at a written level, it is important to place either a time frame or the number of pages that will be covered as an extra guide to ensure that the child has a clear idea of when each subject will begin and end. It stops the child from trying to figure out when this change in subject is going to occur, ensuring that instead they're more ready to learn and they're more receptive to taking in what's being said. Another strategy that many parents use is colour coding. They colour code any schedule with colours associated with each subject. For instance, if somebody marks English as a red subject, you would cover the side of the English book, or the English copybooks indeed, with a red piece of paper. You can sellotape it on, but then it would be important to transfer that information to any English slot on any schedule, be it visual schedule, be it in a homework journal, be it up on the board, whatever. That's English is always represented in that same colour. I suppose by colour coding the books as well, it also allows the child to look just for the colour. It takes the pressure out of reading, it takes the pressure out of having to take note of subjects by identifying language, instead identifying with colour. It makes things a lot easier for the child. Now, scheduling can actually be very beneficial for all of the class, not just the child with autism, but it is important to note the child's the child with autism's needs. A schedule is as individualistic as autism. We should note whether it is better for them to have schedules on the board for all, or to see, or for to have them laminated and placed on their desks or in homework journals or whatever. A sensory break card is another thing that can be used for a child with autism. It's a laminated piece of blue card that may have the word sensory break on it. It can be very discreetly used for the child that is more high functioning, where they're starting to understand when they need further breaks throughout the day. It can be handed to the teacher very discreetly, or it can be indeed held up for the teacher to see. It allows the child that extra space as well to take themselves out of the classroom should their sensory needs become too overwhelming or too great. Now, this can often be met with trepidation, that people worry that it may be used as an excuse for the child to get out of class. Now, whilst this is sometimes the case, more often than not what happens is that as the child becomes used to using this, and as they become more aware of their own sensory regulations, they will in fact start settling into the class routine and lessen their use of the sensory break card, and this overuse will eventually stop. It's definitely worth persevering with, and it is something that can prove hugely beneficial to a child that perhaps may become very overwhelmed if not given that extra opportunity to self-regulate when necessary. With regards to a child becoming very overwhelmed, it's a very good idea to have a go-to person in place, a safe person that they can go to. Having this person in place as a staple for the child when the child is starting to feel overwhelmed can in fact reduce anxiety for the child. It can enable them to regulate themselves in the space that they're in without having to even go to that person. It also gives them a safe space that they can go to regulate themselves should they need to. And it is somebody also that a child can speak to, that a child can request to talk to their parents, that a child can ask to call home if it's absolutely necessary. Now, when this go-to person is consistent, they do develop a great understanding of the child, and they do actually help the child to read their own sensory regulation behaviours and help them to implement those strategies that perhaps have been previously discussed. It can make the difference between a child remaining in school throughout a whole day and having to leave as the day goes on. One other thing that I find very, very useful is a homeschool journal or a communication journal. This is a copy or a journal, one of those day-to-day journals that is written in every single day by both the parent and the teacher. It allows the teacher to see how a child has behaved at home, and equally it allows the parent to see how the child has behaved at school. It's really, really, really useful in helping to identify triggers or challenging behaviours, the causes of challenging behaviours, I suppose, when both at home and at school. And it can be really, really good in identifying any pattern preceding any behaviour or any challenging time for a child. And of course, when you do identify some triggers that perhaps set the child up for challenging behaviour, it's a really good tool to be able to change things up and to ensure that challenging behaviour doesn't occur. Now, one thing I will say is that a lot of teachers often are too busy, or an SNA is too busy to be able to fill out a homeschool journal every single day because of the weight of the working class that needs to be covered. Another thing that a parent can do if it's impossible for a teacher or an SNA to write in a homeschool journal every day is to perhaps swap your email address with the teacher. If you swap the email address with the teacher, and if the teacher in turn gives you hers, it allows for you to communicate at a different level. It makes the space for a parent or a teacher indeed to write maybe 2 or 3 lines in the day and let each other know whether or not things have been difficult or whether or not things have gone great. It just takes that time management part out of things, that it's possible to speak or to communicate with a teacher, or vice versa, in an evening time if the day has been too busy to fill out things during the day. It just makes sure, it just helps to keep those lines of communication open, and the lines of communication are vital to the well-being of any child in school, not just those with ASD. It's also very useful when you do have the teacher's email address to perhaps ask the teacher to email homework to you, or to give those, like to write down homework, take the pressure of another pressure off the child. The child isn't expected then to write or to take note and to try and visually figure out, looking from the board, looking to the page and having to repeat that. It prevents them losing the information that perhaps they're not seeing, or that they're forgetting between looking at the board and looking at their copy. When homework is given in email format, or if the homework is even written down, it can actually take the pressure off the child completely, and it also allows for the parent to be able to see perhaps if the child's writing is a little bit more difficult to read or whatever, that you can make sure that your child is staying on top of things. It just allows for it to be a little bit more organised. It's also great in reverse to be able to communicate any difficulties with homework then, and perhaps come up with different strategies that would suit the child, be it a reduced homework plan, or be it a shortened time, allocating a set time and only a set time to each subject, taking that kind of pressure off the child as well. It can be absolutely great in alleviating any kind of anxiety or pressure that the child feels, and again, it allows them to be more ready for learning during the day in school. I suppose the other thing is transitioning from nursery to primary school, or primary to secondary school. Tips, I suppose, to give would be going to the school prior to the child starting school, videotaping the corridors and the classrooms of the school, taking photographs, meeting the teacher before starting school, even for a child transitioning from first to second class, or seniors to first, or whatever class, meeting the class teacher before the child starts school, or meeting the resource teacher that is going to be teaching them for the year. Just even having that information at hand to be able to share with the child can alleviate any anxiety. Giving the child the opportunity to plan where they're going to sit in class, so that they can not only navigate away into their seat, but they can also navigate and exit should they become overwhelmed, and should the need arise for them to leave very, very soon. Have their school bag organised, have things done from biggest to smallest, or have the books perhaps where possible turned on its side, so that the child can see any colour coding that is done, so that again they can link back to that colour coding, English is red, and so on and so forth. The one thing I think though that is most important to say is that every parent knows their child best. Every parent has an idea as to how their child learns best. Every parent knows how their child communicates their behaviours. We all know our children best. And the most important thing of everything is just keeping the line of communication open, not only between the parent and the child, or the parent and the school, but in fact the parent and the child where possible as well. All these strategies are only they're only ideas, and at the end of the day, you know your child best. You know what's going to suit him best. You will be the one that will be navigating this system and figuring out what suits him best as he moves forward through his education. But remember, with your help and with you in his corner and with you advocating for him as he goes through the education system, he will succeed and he will realise his potential.
Good evening and welcome back to Autism Journeys, and I'm here at the Irish Guide Dogs and I'm joined with Aileen Foye. Welcome, Aileen.
Thank you, Emma.
And you've been working with the Guide Dogs for how long?
So I came in on a 6-month contract 12 years ago, so they're struggling to get rid of me, and I'm determined to stay with it. I love it here.
And Aileen, are you brought in specifically to train assistant dogs for children with autism?
No, I actually started as personal assistant to the chief executive, and I was here for almost for a year and a half, and 2 apprenticeship positions came up to train dogs for children with autism. and I was just extremely lucky. I was one of the successful candidates.
Brilliant. Tell me a little bit about the training and how it differs from training for the guide dogs for the blind.
Okay, so for the assistance dogs, the initial training is very similar. They're raised with a family for the first 12 to 14 months.
As the puppy walkers?
As the puppy walkers, yeah. So they do the basic house training, toilet training, basic commands and instructions, and get them used to socialisation. So they go to coffee shops, onto the bus, things like that. Amazing work, really, considering they're volunteers. We couldn't do it without them. My own next door neighbours were puppy walkers when I was growing up, which was just amazing to see. And they just get them nice, and they've stopped weeing and destroying their house, and we whip them off them at about 14 months of age. Then they come into us for early training. So they spend between 3 and 6 months in early training, and that's where the more technical instruction starts. And it's during that period that we decide if they're going for a guide versus assistance dog. So your guide dog is a very go-y, assertive, confident dog that'll make decisions. Your assistance dog is much more submissive, has to be obviously very patient and tolerant of the behaviours of autism. And they kind of plod along and look up, where to next, mum or dad, and they take instruction from the handler that way. It's much more fluid, whereas the guide dog work is much more structured.
And who actually designed the programme for the autistic children?
So it was originally a programme from Canada. One of our instructors and our previous manager went to Canada and trained, and they brought the training back here. So we were the first in Europe to do it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and it was a pilot project and phenomenally successful, really. We've since trained various instructors who've come from around Europe, and as far away as Australia have come over, and they have since set up programs in Europe and Australia, and yeah, it's been a huge success.
Brilliant. And how do you go about matching children with the dogs?
So that's the complex part of it, really. I suppose the initial phase is when, as the instructor, you get the dog in the latter part of the training, so the last 3 months. And the first couple of weeks, you just get to know the dog, get to trust them, them to trust you, and you see what type they are, having had a handover from the early training team. So the first thing we look at is the child, so what the child's behaviours are. Are they very tactile? Are they how sensory are they? Do they do deep pressure seeking? Examples being now for a child who maybe has hearing sensitivity, you wouldn't match them with a dog who is very vocal or maybe whines or cries.
Right.
If you have a child with hearing sensitivity, obviously situations like going into a supermarket, you go down the fridge freezer aisle where you get that really horrible buzzing sound that most of us don't notice, but to a child with autism is obviously extremely distressing. So you get your fight or flight behaviour. So if it's flight, then we train the dog obviously to stand still if the child bolts. If it's a fight behaviour, if they drop to the ground, if they're kicking, crying, screaming, then we teach the handler how to manage the dog, keep the child safe, but block the dog from any negative behaviour. For children who are touch sensitive, maybe who are toe walkers, so they're often, because of the toe walking, their Achilles heel doesn't develop as well, their balance is off, so they'll often stumble a lot and maybe lean on the dog. So we'll make sure that we match them to a dog who likes that body contact, so that they have a bit of stability there and they don't get distressed by the child falling on them. With the body sensitivity, some of the children love the whack of the tail, or they love the repetitive petting of the coat. They might like the feel of the coat as well, but they may not like the wetness of the tongue or the nose. So we'll make sure that we don't match them to a dog who licks a lot, a very licky dog, is a technical term. And we would also make sure that the dog likes that kind of body contact as well. Particularly the children who are deep pressure seeking, if they start to do deep pressure on the dog, not all dogs would like that, so you have to make sure that you match them to the suitable.
That they're not too rough with the dog.
They're not too rough with the dog. The dogs themselves have different body sensitivities, so some of them love contact, others don't like it as much. Some get too excited by it, so if they get too excited, then it can be detrimental to their training as well.
Excellent. And you showed me before we started the interview the assessment room. Can you talk me through that a little bit? There was nice social stories up there on the wall.
So when we're doing the assessments, we use a room in our centre here. It's a great room in that the families can come in, they can relax. There's toys to play with. We have a double bolt on the door for the escape artists, and the windows are locked. There's a restrictor on them, and we have a fabulous tactile wall that one of our lovely mums made for us. She had it in her house, and we were admiring it, and she offered to make it. We just gave her the supplies.
And I love that it was interchangeable.
Yeah. So all the tiles, there's about 20 tiles on it with different textures, and they're on Velcro. So if they get damaged or they need to be changed up a little bit, we can just swap them out. One of our colleagues painted a lorry underneath it as well, so it looks like a moving truck, which is great.
Fabulous.
So we use that room to do the assessments and get the children used to being around, see how they are around a dog, whether they like them, whether they interact with them, before doing an attachment. We were talking about the matching with the child as well. So obviously is that the first thing we match to is the child, then we match to the parents, so mum or dad or the guardian. Then we match to the siblings, so how many siblings. Sometimes the siblings can be more challenging than the child with autism.
And would you bring the siblings in on the same day? The whole family?
The whole family have to be here, yeah. Mm-hmm. After that, then we look at the environment that they have to work or live in. So do they live in a house? Do they live in an apartment? Is it country? Is it city? Do they use public transport? Do they have a 2-hour commute in the car every day? Because all of this needs to be factored into finding the right match for a dog. And that's why it takes so long, because once you're accepted on the waiting list, it doesn't mean that you get the next dog. It means we have to find the right dog to suit your needs, looking at all the criteria that your family needs,
Excellent. And you had really good social stories.
Yes, so we have social stories, and it's on our website as well, so any families who are coming in for assessment will let them know that the social stories are on the website. So we have photographs and a cartoon version of it, and it helps with the families who use visual scheduling. We also encourage them to take photographs when they're here in the centre, particularly if the child attaches up and wears the belt and holds the handle. And that again will help later on. We also do, in many cases, we do a matching visit. So when the family gets that lovely phone call saying, we think we have the right dog for you, we might invite them down here to the centre. They get to meet the actual dog. So we they get a photograph of the dog, they get a photograph of the instructor, they get they see a photograph of mum or dad with the dog. So whichever parent is coming to do the training, they can incorporate that again into their visual scheduling and to the countdown on the calendar, saying mum is going on such and such a date, she'll be back on such a date with this dog.
Fabulous.
So again, it helps with that transition period, because it's very hard. Many of the mums or dads who come for training have never left their children before, and to leave them for 5 nights is huge. So it's a big commitment.
And how long would you work with the child and the dog?
So we work with initially we work with the parent for 6 days, Sunday night to Friday, and then they go home, and the first weekend is about settling the dog in, and then the following 2 to 3 weeks we work with the parent and who has done the training and the child. So it's usually around 4 to 5 visits over the following 2 to 3 weeks. I've done as many as 13 visits. It really depends on the child and what they need and how able they are to adjust. And then we leave them alone for about 6 weeks. Now, we don't just abandon them. We're at the end of the phone. And if we can't deal with the issue over the phone, we come and see them again. So then we see them at 6 weeks, see how they're getting on, set new goals, see them at 6 months, and then at 12 months. And after that, then really it's, unless we hear from them, we assume everything is fine.
Right.
And we don't see them really again until they're close to retirement.
And what positive feedback have you had from the parents? How it's helped their child?
It's been fantastic. We have some lovely testimonials on our website of some of the fantastic benefits. The primary one is the safety. The dogs are like moving anchors and moving security blankets at the same time. So that in itself is huge. So for the parents to have the confidence to, it takes a lot of faith to trust the dog and to actually let go of their child. They've had a death grip on this child for 6, 7, 8 years. It's usually the hand, the wrist, or the back of the jacket.
Right.
And that constant pull and tug, it's a natural stress energy, but it's a real negative energy, and it's passing to the child all the time. Whereas when they let go, it helps the child to have that little bit of independence and freedom, and it's much nicer. Like walking down the road, having someone pulling you the whole time is horrible. Whereas walking down the road, holding your dog, feeling in control is much nicer.
Which must instill some confidence in the child.
Absolutely, gives them a lot of confidence, and generally speaking, within about 2 weeks, the children stop bolting. As a result, mum and dad's stress levels reduce, so they go out more, they get more social interaction.
So it really, really does enhance their social skills.
Absolutely, and they get a really lovely interaction from the public as well. Now, a lot of people, because autism is such a hidden disability, really, most of the children don't look like there's a disability there. So when they're upset in public, you get a lot of touching, commenting, busybodies getting involved, really. Whereas when the dog is there, they realise something is wrong, something is different.
Right.
So although you are labelling your child with, that there's something wrong, it can have huge benefits in that you get a chance to, people will give you a bit more space, a bit more time. You get a lot of people staring, but most of the families are used to that anyway. But it's a really different stare. It's kind of a head tilt, look at the dog with the blue jacket. They're actually looking at the dog rather than at the child. Now, they'll probably think your child is blind, but it doesn't really matter what they think. They just know that something is different. And you get a lot more patience. A good example being if you're in a shop and you're queuing up and your child with autism, they don't do waiting. Whereas waiting with the dog, they may still get a little bit impatient, but sometimes people will let them go ahead. Sometimes, whoever's behind the counter will give them that couple of extra minutes. They might even say, "Oh, is that your dog?" The other benefits, so the safety is the primary function. For some of the children who have verbal skills, some of them have started repeating the commands and learn, so it's increasing the vocabulary, but a big part of it is road safety. So they get a visual image of what wait is. So if you want to stop at the curb, up to the curb, wait, so they visually see what it is you're asking of them. And they will often preempt the parent, and they'll start giving the command up to the curb and wait themselves, which is great.
Brilliant.
On very, very exceptional cases, we have children who are non-verbal who have rediscovered some of their words or have been able to be relaxed enough to let some out. I have had one child who had lost his words, as his parents would say, and at the age of 2.5, and within a month of getting his dog, at 7, his first word was his dog's name.
Brilliant, that's fabulous.
And then 2 months later, he said Mama and Dada. Now, that's exceptional, and it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's just amazing. And he's got about 20 words now, so it's whatever it is, we don't know why, but the dog has helped him to release the words that he obviously
probably
has.
Because a part of it, he feels so relaxed around the companion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of our previous guests on the show, Nicole Duggan, she's actually in the process now of getting a guide dog, and I know she's doing a fundraiser. Mm-hmm. So how much does it cost to get a guide dog?
So I suppose the rough estimate we have is about 38,000 per dog, and that's to train and maintain them for life. So all of the visits, all the food, all the veterinary costs. So it's a huge investment, really. And
is that up to the parent to raise that money?
No, it's up to it's all. We don't charge for the dogs. Well, so we do. We charge a whopping €1, and that's it's to make it. It's a legal contract, so we have the right to say how the dog is kept and maintained.
Right.
And by handing over €1, you're signing the contract, so it makes it legal. We expect the families to take on the cost of feeding the dog, the veterinary costs, the grooming. No, we expect them to do the grooming, but sometimes if you want extra grooming, you can pay for that yourselves. But we provide everything else to get you started, all the equipment. Now, if you want to go and get a fancy bling collar or something for your dog, you can, obviously you incur those costs yourself. So yeah, it'll cost around just over 5 million to run the service for the year, and 80% of that is from the public, so it's phenomenal really. We get great support from the public. People have such an affinity with dogs, they just love them, they can't help themselves.
Brilliant.
And most people think of Irish guide dogs, they think of the dogs, but it's actually the people behind the dogs that are the ones that are important, the vision impaired clients, the children with autism, all the staff, the volunteers, it's a whole team that's involved in getting the dogs to this stage.
And what kind of age of children would have a dog?
So we have a cut-off age for application. So we reopened our list on the 14th of November. The intention was to take in 40 clients, but we were totally inundated.
Really?
Yeah, within 37 minutes we had 117 clients.
Good God. So
we had to close our waiting list again. We had a cut-off age. The children had to be between 4 and 7. The actual cut-off age is 10, so by applying under the age of 7 you have a chance of getting a dog before you turn 10. That's why we had to cut it off so early.
Right. And why do you do that? Just because of the early...
Mostly the early intervention. Mm-hmm. We had a very good study from UCC showing the benefits of the early intervention, and the younger the child, the better. But also the children who are kind of 8, 9, 10, they're physically very strong. They can be very tall in a lot of cases, and they're just too strong. The dogs can't. It's too much on the spine for the dogs to be able to hold them back. So we have to obviously consider the dog's well-being as well.
Brilliant. And how many approximately families do you think you've provided for at the moment? Over the years?
I don't have the exact number, but it's well over 300 at this stage. It's, as I said, the benefits. Each family is very different, each dog is different, each child is different, so what one family will get will be totally different to another family. But it's been fantastic success really. A lot of hard work now, there's no, I can't underestimate really how much work is involved. We've just introduced a new pre-training course that I'm running. It's a new section of the application. So I'm meeting the parents for 2 days and going through all the pros and the cons of AD ownership. All of our testimonials on the website are obviously the positive ones for obvious reasons, but we have many families who have a lot of challenges along the way, and they're less inclined to talk about the negative side of it. But so that's why I'm involved, and it's really not to dissuade people from applying for a dog, but to give them a real understanding of the commitments that they're making.
And I'm sure, Aileen, it doesn't work for every family.
No, we do have a very high success rate, but what, particularly with the pre-training, is to try and reduce the chance of a dog coming back. Because when it does happen, it's very tough. It's very hard on everyone. It's upsetting for the family. It's hard on the staff, and it's hard on the puppy walkers to know their dog has come back again.
Of course.
So by doing the pre-training course, we're hoping to reduce the chances of that happening. Really, although it's a week's training here and maybe 2 or 3 weeks at home with the child, it's really the first 6 months to a year is where all the hard work is done. We like to say it's a little bit like bringing home a new baby that can run already.
Yes. Good example.
Yeah, the work doesn't reduce, but you do figure it out. At the start it's a bit overwhelming, but gradually, you feel like they've always been there. And it's having the support at home and making sure that everyone is on board as well. So what can be tough is if one parent is more enthusiastic than the other. Ideally, we would have one parent at home full time, because you need to be able to do the maintenance walks where you maintain the dog standards, and preferably you have somebody at home who can do that while the children are in school. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's hugely rewarding, and even the families who found it tough. I have one fabulous mum they have 4 children with 2 disabilities, and she said the first 4 months going out with her dog was harder. It takes an awful lot of faith to keep persisting with the program under those circumstances. But she believed in it and she knew, and I had prepped her for it.
Brilliant.
And she kept in contact and we kept working through it, and now she's a year in and she wouldn't leave the house without her dog.
Fantastic.
So brilliant.
And you're all doing superb work down here, Aileen. Anybody listening in who is interested, how would they start the process? Where could they find information?
So we have information on our website. Unfortunately, as I said, our applications are still closed at the moment. I don't expect that it'll reopen again for probably the end of next year. But just keep an eye on our website. They can always contact me at any stage and I can talk them through it. I'm the first port of call, or drop me an email. And anyone who wants to maybe get involved in the organisation, there's various ways that you can volunteer. We have people who are helping in fundraising, helping in our dog care and welfare team, looking after the dogs.
And you need puppy walkers?
We need puppy walkers, yeah. We're actively looking for puppy walkers to take on the responsibility of the dog for the first year. It's an amazing thing to do. I have such admiration for them. And it's a great way to find out if a dog suits your life as well, because you get all the support and training without the lifetime commitment of taking on a dog. So
excellent.
It can be very rewarding.
Thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us. This is Aileen Foye. Thank you.
Until next week, guys, thanks very much.